Imagine you are the most powerful man on earth. You command the largest empire in the history of civilization. Millions of people, their lives, their wars, their fate, rest entirely on your decisions. And every single morning, before you face any of it, you open a private journal and you write. Not orders, not battle plans, not commands, philosophy. That man was Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, and that journal, which he never intended anyone to read, became one of the most influential books in human history. But here is what nobody tells you. Marcus Aurelius was not the only one. Presidents read it. Generals carried it into battle. Former slaves wrote it. Billionaires reread it every single year. And in the next few minutes, I am going to show you exactly what this philosophy is, why it has worked for thousands of years, and how you can use it, starting today. 2. Let us be honest about something first. When most people hear the word philosophy, their eyes glaze over. They picture dusty professors, dense, impossible books, abstract debates about questions no one can answer. And honestly, that reaction makes sense, because that is exactly how philosophy gets taught. But here is the thing. That version of philosophy is not what the great Stoics practiced. The Stoics were not sitting in ivory towers. They were on the battlefield. They were in the Senate. They were facing execution, exile, and slavery, and they used philosophy as their weapon to survive and to lead. The philosopher Thoreau said it best. To be a philosopher is not merely to have subtle thoughts. It is to solve some of the problems of life, not only theoretically, but practically. Practically. That is the key word, and no school of thought in human history has ever been more practical, more immediately usable than Stoicism. So what is Stoicism really? At its core, Stoicism is deceptively simple. It was founded in Athens around 300 BC by a man named Zeno of Sichem. But the philosophy truly came alive through 4 extraordinary figures. Epictetus, a man born into slavery who became one of the greatest teachers of his era. Seneca, a Roman statesman and writer whose letters still read like they were written yesterday. Cato, a Roman senator of such unshakable moral principle that even his enemies admired him. And Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, the most powerful man in the world, who spent his private moments writing reminders to himself on how to be a better human being. These 4 men lived completely different lives, different centuries, different circumstances, worlds apart, but they all shared one foundational belief. A belief so simple it almost sounds too easy. There are things in this world you can control, and things you cannot. Your only job is to know the difference. Epictetus said it this way: in life our first job is this, to divide and distinguish things into 2 categories. Externals I cannot control, but the choices I make with regard to them I do control. Where will I find good and bad? In me, in my choices. Read that again slowly. In me, in my choices. Not in the economy. Not in what other people think of you. Not in whether things go according to plan. In you. In your response. That is Stoicism. 2. Now here is something that often gets overlooked. People assume that a philosophy of acceptance means a philosophy of passivity. That Stoics just breathe deeply and let the world happen to them. Nothing could be further from the truth. The Stoics were the most active people in their world. Marcus Aurelius led armies across brutal frontiers. He governed an empire spanning from England to Egypt for nearly 2 decades, while simultaneously dealing with plagues, wars, and political betrayal. Cato, when Julius Caesar began dismantling the Roman Republic, did not retreat into meditation. He fought. He resisted. And when he could no longer do so, he died on his own terms, defiant until his final breath. Even Epictetus, a man who was literally owned by another person, built one of the most respected philosophical schools in the ancient world, from nothing, with no freedom, no money, and no power, except the power of his mind. The writer Nassim Taleb described a Stoic perfectly when he said a Stoic is someone who transforms fear into prudence, pain into transformation, mistakes into initiation, and desire into undertaking. That is not passivity, that is alchemy, taking the raw, painful, messy material of life and turning it into something powerful. Now here is where it gets truly fascinating. Once you start looking for Stoicism throughout history, you see it everywhere. Frederick the Great, King of Prussia, one of the most brilliant military minds in European history, rode into battle with the works of the Stoics in his saddlebags. He said they could, in his own words, sustain you in misfortune. Think about that. A king on horseback, riding into war, carrying ancient philosophy with him. The French essayist Montaigne had a quote from Epictetus carved into the wooden beam above his writing desk. Not printed, not framed, carved. Permanent. Then there are the founding fathers of America. George Washington was introduced to Stoicism at 17 years old, and during the darkest moment of the Revolutionary War. That brutal winter at Valley Forge, when his soldiers were starving and freezing and ready to give up, Washington did not give a rousing speech. He put on a play about Keto, to remind his men what it looked like to fight for something greater than yourself with unbreakable courage. Thomas Jefferson kept a copy of Seneca on his nightstand when he died. Adam Smith, the father of modern economics, the man whose ideas shaped capitalism itself, developed his theories under a teacher who had translated Marcus Aurelius. John Stuart Mill, one of the greatest political philosophers in history, called Stoicism the highest ethical product of the ancient mind. And it was not only Western leaders. Toussaint Louverture, a man born into slavery who led the Haitian Revolution and defeated Napoleon's army, drew deep inspiration from the words of Epictetus. Think about what that means. A man born in chains, reading the words of another man born in chains, and using that philosophy to liberate an entire nation. Theodore Roosevelt. After his presidency, Teddy led an expedition into the uncharted Amazon jungle. 8 months. Unknown territory. He nearly died. He brought 8 books. 2 of them were Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus. Roosevelt captured the Stoic spirit when he said, "We must all wear out or rust out, every one of us. My choice is to wear out, not passive, not quiet, burning completely." Now you might be thinking, this is all remarkable. But these are historical figures. What about today? Bill Clinton rereads Marcus Aurelius every single year. Wen Jiabao, the former Prime Minister of China, says Meditations is one of 2 books he carries everywhere he travels. He has read it over 100 times throughout his life. Stoicism is not a relic of the past. It is the operating system of the world's most effective leaders. And it always has been, because here is the truth that Stoicism keeps proving, century after century, civilization after civilization. External circumstances will always be unpredictable. Markets crash, empires fall, people disappoint you, plans fail, bodies break down. The only stable foundation you will ever have is how you respond. And that is completely, entirely, always yours. So what does this actually look like in practice? Here is the Stoic framework, stripped down to its simplest form. Step 1. Pause. Before you react to anything, a conflict, a setback, a piece of bad news, pause. Even for 5 seconds. Create space between what happens to you and how you choose to respond. Step 2. Divide. Ask yourself, is this something I control, Or is this something I do not? If you can change it, act, move. Do something. If you cannot, release it, not with defeat, with intention. Step 3. Focus on your choices. The Stoics believed your character, your decisions, are the only things that are truly and permanently yours. So make those choices reflect who you want to be, not who fear makes you, not who circumstances push you to be, who you decide to be. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journal something that has echoed through history ever since. The obstacle is not in your way. The obstacle is the way. Whatever is standing between you and where you want to be right now, that is your practice. That is your training ground. That is where philosophy stops being a theory and becomes a life. 2. Stoicism was never meant to live in a classroom. It was never meant to be debated in lecture halls or locked inside academic journals. It was practiced by slaves and emperors, artists and generals, presidents and revolutionaries. Because it works. It has always worked. It works right now. Because real philosophy does not ask you to understand life. It asks you to live it better. The mantle is ours to pick up. So, what obstacle in your life are you going to stop reacting to and start using?